Now, I was taught that there are 11 major elements, which are rapport, authority, influence, acceptance, commitment, reciprocation, scarcity, social proof, beliefs, curiosity, outcomes, and body language, which are the key frames and elements. However, in addition to the elements, there are seedings, there are stories, there are metaphors, there are pains or games, or 21 ways to influence people at a conscious and at a subconscious level to get them to desire, want to take action with your products, your services, your ideas, and your concepts. So that's why I'm going to spend a fair amount of time tonight kind of going through. Number one, and I did mention this last week, is establishing your authority. Need to establish your authority very quickly. Now, one of the ways that I establish authority is the first thing is I do directive control. I usually get people to stand up and take some action. I also want them to see that the first image of me is loud and proud, right? So many times when I'm present, you'll see me put my arms up as I'm doing right now, right? And I'll do that kind of gesture because I do not want to convey weakness. I do not want to convey, scare, being afraid, right? So I'll do something that's strong and powerful to grab their attention, right? And I want to establish, my authority quickly. So typically what I will do is a fast fact sheet or a video. And I'll kind of show you one of the or two of these tonight so you can kind of have an example. If you increase your authority, you reduce their resistance. Right? Now, one of the ways I do authority is I do something called directive control. Now, some of you have maybe heard me talk about this, at dynamic presenting or other workshops where I've been teaching. What directive control means is I'm going to tell them to do something, and it doesn't matter what I tell them to do. What matters is they follow my direction. So when I'm getting up at the front, I'll say, on a scale of 0 to 10, that was a -3, right? Looks like the energy's low. I wonder if you can stand up. Magic language pattern. We'll talk about that again tonight. I wonder if you can stand up, which is a command. It is a directive. It literally, they go in their head, yes, I can, and they do. And then once I've done directive control, I'm basically saying to them at a physiological piece, I'm the teacher, you're the student, do what I tell you to do. Now, I can do that not only at the beginning, but I can do that through the presentation. So I can say, as I'm talking, put your pens and papers down and listen to me actively. If they put their pens and papers down, I'm in control, they're the student. I can actually say, grab your pen, write this down. It's one of the more important elements. And I have no idea what I'm going to say next. All I'm doing is getting them to do mini agreements through directive control. I also use agreement frames, you guys know that. But I'm going to get mini agreements so there's less resistance to my concepts, my ideas, my strategies. And authority reduces resistance. So you want to be the expert from the beginning, right? Either through your body language or through directive control or through statements of results and things of that nature. Case studies, certainly if you have case studies of students, case studies of yourself, that helps with authority. Proximity of power, the pictures that you have. I quite often have pictures of the different individuals as a group. And quite often, as the presentation is starting, I have pictures of me with successful people, which kind of brings me to a point about, quotes and what you do before you present, right? And one of the things that I do before I present, right, this is not at BGS, it's just my own workshops that I've done in the past, is I have a 20-minute reel, a 20-minute PowerPoint or keynote that every 15 seconds a quote comes up. And those quotes typically are influential quotes about taking action, about success, about, what successful people do. And then about every fifth slide, there's a joke, right? Now, the reason I do that before the workshop starts is people are watching the quotes, which influences them positively, but it also influences them when they see a joke every once in a while, they laugh to themselves, which is a dopamine hit, and that dopamine hits them before I actually step up, right? So it's a very indirect piece, but it's a piece that I do regularly before the workshop starts. Brings an interesting question. Many people wait until 9 o'clock and then let the people in, and that creates a sense of, wanting and desire and getting in there fast. Some people, actually let them in early. I typically, if I'm doing my own 3-day workshop, not at BGS or not at Dynamic Presenting, I typically will let them in at 8:30 and the presentation starts at 9. And during that first 30 minutes, my staff are walking around getting to know people as they're sitting in their chairs comfortably. And I've got a screen up there that has quotes and jokes to make them have fun and enjoy the process before I ever step onto stage, right? So we can literally increase our authority with quotes. Proximity to Power, pictures with Tony Robbins, Og Mandino, Dennis Waitley, Patricia Fripp, Lane Longfellow, Brian Tracy, Les Brown, right? Even videos sometimes. And one of my favorite things to do is fast facts, right? Fast facts is that a slide that has some of your major accomplishments in life or about the product or service that you're chatting about. If I was doing real estate, I would talk about my real estate success. If I was doing trading, I would talk about my trading success. But the whole point here is if I have this slide up there before I go to present, this could be the slide that the MC is going to introduce me with, and or she is going to do 3 or 4 of these elements. And I know that people read faster than they listen. So most people have read these 12 items before the MC actually picks up the microphone, right? So it's a fast and furious way to get them fast facts, which is almost with my story, a success statement where they go, holy crap, I didn't know he did that. I didn't know he did all those things, right? So it's a great way, and fast facts is a way, again, to increase your authority. So each one of you should have a fast fact sheet, right? Fast fact sheet for your presentations, fast fact sheet in general with respect to it. You may pop up things like the pictures of the most successful people you've worked with, whether that's Tony Robbins or Les Brown or, Warren Buffett's in there, Zig Ziglar's in there. I mean, there's dozens of people in there, and there's actually some UK folks in here, Martin Roberts for the BBC, and John, and actually, you got Ross in there and Adam and all kinds of folks, right? And that gives you a little bit of an authority and a leg up from what they are in terms of your audience, right? If you have some very successful people, you can actually drop them in there. And I don't know whether you consider Donald Trump successful or not, doesn't really matter. He is fairly well known. So I'm going to kind of, right? I'm going to show that, I was invited to the inauguration, right? It elevates me a little. Now, this one I'm a little bit sensitive to because some people hate him and some people love him. The whole point I'm trying to make is as an authority, you want to get pictures with as many successful people as possible. Ideally, at some point, in terms of your authority, you want to build a video. You want to get a nice video there, right? So that builds your authority. We also want to capture attention very quickly. So in the first 30 to 60 seconds, you must grab their attention. Either make a bold statement, directive control, be different than all the other speakers that are out there. When I went to AdCon and I went to, Expert Empires, right? In terms of speaking on stage for 30 minutes, everybody did the 2-question open, right? Which is a great presentation, no question. You do the 2-question open, you do the mind read of where they're at, you do the future pace of where they want to go, and you do the build, right? The introduction, the bridge. Great, fantastic. But you do want to be unique and different, right? So unique and different might be using a different open. That open might be a quote open. That open might be a directive control open. That open might be something controversial, to get them thinking about your product, your service, right? And your physical stature needs to be strong and powerful. Now, I always talk about the steepled hands. That's a great way, but you should walk up there like you own the stage. Capture attention, directive control right away, right? We also want to make sure that we grab the audience. We talk about the audience's pain, and this is that skill that is called mind reading. Now, mind reading is generally a great skill in general because if you can mind read what the 3 to 7 problems of your prospect are, and then you can bring the solution to them, you're more likely to sell your products and services. And because you're mind reading where they're at, right, that generally builds an element of rapport, especially if you were like them at this moment in time and you made a shift or a change, you got a skill set, there happened, an epiphany happened where you change your future. And that's where the whole my story comes into play. Not only that, in the open. In the open, you want to mind read a minimum of three problems that they have. Three common problems, for the four types of people, right? Whether that's financial or whether that's emotional or whether that's family related, whatever it might be, right? And you want to identify their pain and get them into their pain before you show them the solution to the pain. You also need to realize that when people come into your audience, right, they come in with a pile of stuff in their head, right? When I say a pile of stuff in their head, most people that come into an audience are looking for reasons not to buy, right? They're not looking for reasons to buy, right? So you need to make sure when you're building your presentations, right, that you deal with the little things, and these are just some, right? The ones that I've seen fairly regularly, right, that happen, right? They don't value a coach. They doubt it works. They have a lack of trust in your system or your process. They have a lack of confidence in themselves. They say to themselves, I can't, I should, right? The negative duck talk. So when I'm doing my presentations, I'm always thinking about what are the seven big doubts, seven big issues that hold people back. One of them is going to be money, no question. One of them is going to be trust, whether or not they trust you, whether they think you're the expert, whether they think your product or service is going to be. One of them is going to be, geez, will this work for me? Yeah, it's work for him or it's work for them, but is it going to work for me? One of them is going to be a spade or a club going, man, this guy tells too many stories, right? And, spades and clubs generally do not like stories, where hearts and diamonds love stories. So somehow you got to relate the story to the spade and the diamond more than you do the heart and the club because they're going to go with you, right? Some of them are overwhelmed. Some of them are afraid, fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of success, fear of the unknown, fear of losing money, which is one of the biggest fears that's out there. And if you do not deal with that as you're doing your presentation with a mini metaphor or a mini story, or a student case study that got them over that hump, they're less likely to buy the product or service. And as a fundamental piece in my mind, every time I put on a slide, I think of it this way. 45 seconds of content information strategies that going to blow their mind. They're going to get great education, great strategies, great information, great gems from Jim, and 15 seconds of sales, right? And when I say 15 seconds of sales, I'm not talking about hard selling. I'm talking about dealing with an issue for 15 seconds, a statement that gets them to want to do something different, right? A great example of this is when I start my presentations, I generally will do the directive control piece, get them to stand up. And then after that, I'm going to do a little piece that I do fairly regularly, which is the SBA principle. And the SBA principle is a three-step process to duplicate anybody's success in life: strategies, belief, and action, right? And I'm going to talk about strategies and belief. And when I talk about strategies and belief, I'm going to say you can buy success, right? And literally, you can buy the system, the treasure map for success, but you have to believe. And that's where I get a chance to deal with some of their negative thoughts, like I should do it, I could do it, as opposed to I must do it, and I'll deal with some of the things like I can't afford it, things of that nature. And then one of the more important elements there when I do strategies, belief, and action, right? And I hope you enjoyed that I'm sharing with you some of the background behind how to deal with this, is action, right? And I'll say which of the three is the most important? Action. And then I want to condition them to take action. So the way that I condition them, and certainly it's one of the ways that I've seen Adam do it as well as Ross do it, is to say something of value is here and getting them to take action, and then rewarding the person who took action. Now, the one I do is a 20-pound note, but I've done a gold key. I've done a book. I've done a number of things to show the general audience if they don't get action, if they don't take action, they're going to miss out. Now, it is a simple conditioning exercise, but what it does, and if you remember me doing it at BGS, I showed the 20, somebody gives me a 10, I show the 10, somebody gives me a 5, I show the 5, somebody gives me a 1. I have messages in between there, And then the one, they take it from me and I say, that is an unlimited rate of return, an infinite rate of return. And what was the key element? They took what? Action. So 4 times I've talked about action being necessary. And then I've reinforced it 4 times by giving away some money or giving away a book or giving away a key or giving away a Think and Grow Rich or whatever it might be. Right. So that is me knowing that one of the issues for the audience is if they don't get motivated to take action, they will procrastinate and they won't take action. And you can condition a response. Now, if you went through social media monetization, at some point, probably during that, Ross or Adam or somebody held these books at the back, and the first 3 people that ran to the back got them, and the other, 57 people did not, right? Well, that creates a little bit of FOMO, and then you can reinforce it by saying, look at the difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is taking action. And the people who did not take action, I have just said to them, the reason they're not successful, or you're not, I didn't say this directly, you're not successful is because you're not taking action. That at a level will disturb people and it will get them thinking about, geez, maybe I should take more action. Maybe I should go for the bonuses. So there are things that you can do to help them get over their own reasons that they say that. Now, many people have this reason, which is, I'll do it myself. Right. Now, the way I deal with do it myself is I do a number of exercises, and one of them is the 10,000 hours exercise. Right. If you do it yourself, and you spend 5 hours a week doing it yourself, you're going to be an expert in 39 years. Now, many of you have heard me say this, and I will actually talk about there is the 40-40-40 plan, which is painful, right? Work 40 hours a week for 40 years, only live on 40%, or there's the 7-7-7 plan. Now, I basically have said your plan is not a good plan. My plan is a great plan, right? So I'm painting the picture of where they're going to be if they continue to do what they're doing, and I'm creating pain for them doing the 10,000 hours, for them doing the 40-40-40 plan, and I'm creating gain if they make a change, a shift, an augmentation, an improvement in terms of their plan. Now, this is very deliberate on my part because I know that most people like to procrastinate. Most people don't like to go through their comfort zone. So it's a very deliberate piece for me. Now, I mentioned this last week. One of the reasons I mentioned Think and Grow Rich is 14 principles of success. One of the principles is to make fast decisions and stay with them for a long period of time. There's also a study on page 139, which says they studied 25,000 people that had failed in life and failed in their business. And what they found, the number one reason was procrastination. Now, this is a third party of a book that is one of the most successful success books in the world, right? And it is saying the reason you're not successful, I'm not saying they're not successful. The book is saying they're not successful because they procrastinate, right? And if you're a club and you're procrastinating, that's the reason you don't have your dreams and goals. Now, I'm saying this deliberately to get into their subconscious, to mess with it, to say if you don't take action, you're doing yourself a disservice. If you don't take action, life doesn't change. Which, by the way, I totally believe in, right? But it is a great little piece, and it only takes me, what did that take me? 45 seconds, 60 seconds to stick that into somebody's head where they go, yeah, you know what? I do procrastinate a lot. Maybe that is the reason I'm not as successful as I could be. Maybe I should be taking more action, right? And that message can be the difference between them running to the back and buying the product or service or not, right? So the little things that you do within the frames, right? The way that you take a slide and you turn it into a pain slide or a gain slide based on a message, is a great thing for you to master. Of course, some sort of transformational story is always a good one. So in a transformational story, there's usually a struggle, a discovery, and then a transformation. That is literally the basis of my story. So we definitely want to make sure. And what it does is it creates some emotions that are chemically based in individuals, right? Emotionally based stories can create tension, which creates cortisol, curiosity, dopamine, connection, oxytocin, not oxycontin, right? And humor can create endorphins. So the more we the better we get at telling stories, you know, to inspire, to motivate, to do struggles, we change brain chemistry, which tends to entertain people, make people feel more curious, make people feel energized. And that's something you want to get really good at, right? And victory, the 0 to hero victory, going from where you were, which is my story, to where you are now, right? That creates serotonin, which is a balancing chemical and hormone. So we definitely want to get good at stories. In fact, just on stories for a second, there are 30 stories that you really want to master. And one of them is going to be about you making a major investment, like I know most of you have done, right? So that gives permission for them to make a major investment, right? You also want to teach content, so this is when you come up with the 7 problems, you want to come up with the 7 solutions, you want to deliver practical insights, teach people. Because when you teach people and you're the authority and you're teaching people, that literally builds trust. Now, you want to be really careful between the how and the why, right? I'll say that another way. The fluff and the stuff, okay? There are a number of speakers out there that believe in fluff, right? They teach stuff, but they don't really teach stuff, right? It looks like they're teaching stuff, but they're not really giving you some of the meat. I believe you need to give people meat, especially the spade and the club, right? Because if you don't give them meat, don't feed them early, they're probably going to wander out and they have money and generally can invest pretty well, right? You want to show them the wow. You want to show them some of the how, but not all of the how. Because if you overteach, what will happen is your close ratio will go down. Because people will start to think in their head, geez, I've got enough for me to go do this myself. Even though that's not true, that most people need a coach or a mentor to walk them through the problems, the issues, the challenges. You definitely want to make sure you're giving them some of the how, but not all of the how. So I'll give you a practical piece. So I teach credit spreads. And when I talk about credit spreads, I talk about the 7 major rules for doing a credit spread. Now, when I do the 7 major rules for doing a credit spread, I share 6 of the 7 rules. And then when I get to rule number 7, I flash it up and I say, man, I would really love to teach you rule number 7. And it's about money management, but it will take me about 2.5 hours to do that. I cover that at my 3-day event, or I cover that in my portal. I cover that in my 6-week program. And what it does is creates a desire for closure, especially for the club individual, right? So it's a loop, right? It is a loop, meaning that I've said there are 7, I give them 6, but the most important one, which is about money management, I don't give. I make that as part of my package, part of my thing. So that would be looping, to create curiosity and desire for completion, right? Linking would be me talking about a great instructor. His name, is Robert Thornton. He taught me 44 strategies for foreclosures. I teach 3 of the strategies, and then I say there's 41 other strategies that you can learn that'll make you tons and tons of money, right? I don't have a chance to teach you right now, but I do have Robert's videos, 12 hours of them online, right? And then I sell Robert's videos as part of my delivery package. That would be a link, right? It's also a little bit of a loop because I said there's 44 and I only taught you 3, right? So we do want to teach valuable content, but you've got to be really careful about not giving them everything, because if you give them everything, they're not going to come back. They won't buy, right? Authority, we definitely want to build authority. I mentioned this the other day. We want to build consistent posting. I'm going to suggest you need at least a 90-day plan, right? You want to specialize. You don't want to make generalized education. You want to specialize in a specific area, build your community over time, have a niche. So I know a lot about financial education. I would not teach financial education. I would teach trading. I would not teach financial education. I would teach property. I would not teach financial education. I would teach internet marketing, right? And when you're doing this, one of the most searched things on YouTube, right, is how to, right? So do 90 reels, 60 seconds or less, one a day, or however many you're going to do at one time, but post them once a day, because their algorithm doesn't really pick up what you're talking about until you get the first 20 or 30 out there. It's kind of figuring out who you are. It's figuring out what your message is and how that message fits to somebody else. You may also want to do a partnership with somebody, so look for influencers. And one of the best things you can do in terms of YouTube is to build your demos of power. Get testimonials on there. Always have a CTA, a call to action, because YouTube will build your authority over time. And I know this because one of my videos, has about 81,000 views, right? So, and people still email me based on that video, although it's not available to anywhere. Need to create emotional engagement. That means you need to use relatable stories. You need to use humor. Emotion drives buying decision. As my friend Marshall Silver says, funny is money. Man, if people are laughing, generally that means that they will be more apt to buy your products or service. A tear often gets past fear. What I mean by that is you might be afraid to make a change, but you see if that change will impact your life positively. Likelihood is going to divot. Emotional stories affect the dopamine levels, so you definitely want to make sure you're doing that. I would also suggest to you that you study humor. And when I say study humor, right, ChatGPT is great. I did a couple of courses earlier in my life at Second City in Toronto, Canada, 3 different times, 30-minute sessions to learn what's funny. Nowadays, you could actually go to ChatGPT and say, I'm doing a business plan, give me some jokes about business plans that I could use in an event, right? So humor is good because it creates the dopamine, the serotonin levels in individuals. Learn some one-liners, right? I tell jokes, and I got to tell you, I'm not an actual joke teller. I study humor. In fact, tonight I'll go home, and I know between 10 and 11 o'clock, I'm going to go watch humor. So I can pick up one or two statements that I could make in a workshop. Whether it's something like money isn't everything, but it keeps you in touch with your kids, right? Or my son the other day, asked me, he said, Dad, how much does it cost to get married? Right? So I said, Mike, I really don't know. I'm still paying, right? Little like joke there, guys, baba boom, right? But one-liners like that in a presentation are good because people about every 15, 20 minutes are evaluating, are they enjoying it? Are they having fun? And as Tony Robbins said, and I asked him, what are the big beliefs you have about sales and presenting and all those kinds of things? And he said, number one is you have to entertain. They have to have fun. And if they don't have fun, they're not coming back. They're not buying your products or service. Show the gap. This is literally saying, here's the before picture of my students, here's the post picture. And the more of those you have, the better off. You've been to BGS, you probably saw at least 25 different testimonials of the before picture and the after picture, proving that it works for people, right? So you want to show the gap. What's the difference from where they are and where they could be with your products and services? This is actually the mind read to the future pace, the before to the after picture, and we definitely want to do that. We also want to make sure you introduce your system early. So what I mean by introducing, you want to show the journey from them, from going from not being a successful business to being a successful business, from not being healthy to being healthy, from not being wealthy to being wealthy, and showing them the steps along the process, right? And you want to show that's a journey and steps, and you want to introduce your products as early as you can. Right. One of the things I used to do at my 3-day workshops is whether it was the wealth, the real estate, the internet, whatever it might be, is I would say this is a beginning course, right? It leads to level 2, level 3, level 4, and level 5. So they knew on day one there were 4 more levels, right? And that way it's not a surprise when you talk about your products and services later on, right? Show them the journey up the mountain that you've taken. We did this with dynamic presenting. You would have probably seen this journey of the 6 steps: pro speaker, 6-figure, instant icon, headliner, right? And we showed you that journey right within the first 30 minutes, right? Because then it's easier for you to seed, it's easier for you to talk about the different elements as you're going through. When I do financial education, I talk about the wealth wheel. Talk about the wealth wheel. I talk first step is education and mentor. Second step is income. Next is growth, big hits, leverage, taxes, and asset protection. And then I jump into income. And if I have 147 strategies, I show them 3 strategies, which is they link the loop for them to learn more. In fact, some of the terms they'll actually write down furiously because they're going, oh my God, I've never heard cover calls. Oh my God, I've never heard credit spreads. Oh my God, I've never heard dogs of the Dow. Right? And it is teasing them with some knowledge, not all knowledge. right? So it's a good piece. You have to address personality. So spades, clubs, diamonds. We kind of know spades need the result. Clubs need the system. Diamonds want to have fun, the vision, hearts. But that's also part about how we build our education. Spades love a case story, right? A club loves a data dump, step 17, right? A heart personality likes emotions and relationships. Diamonds love to have interactive exercises. So we kind of need to build our presentation, whether it's a 1 day or 90 minutes, based on the different types of individuals. You need proof, right? So proof is case studies. Proof is evidence that builds confidence and trust within you. It is checks, it evaluations, it's fast facts, right? So if I'm doing trading, I'll show one of my students sending me a text on, making, 21,000, right, on a $40,000 investment in less than 9 days. I'll show them my personal checks that I did from real estate, from property investment. I'll show them evaluations of my courses, whether that's Trustpilot or actually a binder full of evaluations. I'll show them a case study of a deal I did where literally it was, a pretty big deal, $1.8 million dollar kind of deal that I did for no money down, right? And I actually assigned it, and somebody else took it off my hands of a hotel, actually, right? I'll show testimonials of the people that have gone through my courses, whether that's Nikki or whether that's Anna or Miles or whoever it might be. The more testimonials, the better off. In fact, one of the things in your YouTube is you should have testimonials on your YouTube channel, a section that is just testimonials. One of my friends has over 1,000 testimonials online, 15 seconds, 30 seconds. Then when you go there, you go, oh crap, he's got 1,000 testimonials. Must know what he's talking about. Builds his authority. Build desire, right? Now, building desire is usually a before picture and an after picture. It is pain, it is gain. It is using the magic words that are painful and the magic words that are gainful. By the way, one of the people you could listen to with respect to that is a guy named Ogilvy. He used to have the Ogilvy, or still does have the Ogilvy Agency, right? And then he would talk about 25 words that are magic in terms of writing copy, ads, landing pages. And he would also talk about 25 words that are negative, that get people into a painful position, with respect to it. Sell relief from the pains that they have, as well as the dreams that they have, right? Build desire before after pictures, looping, linking, seeding. And one of the things you want to do is within your story, your 5 steps, the success, the struggle, the skill, or what I call the epiphany, the new outcome, and the bridge. If you're over here and you want to be over here, you need a new system, a new process, is you want to show this is who I was, and I was like you. I had the same problems as you, I had the same issues as you. And now my life is different because of my coach, my mentor, my system, my process, whatever it might be, right? And create envy. So there's nothing wrong with you showing your before picture and your after picture and being loud and proud. Because if you could do it, they could do it. And actually, it builds rapport with them, right? And sells, right? Deal with objections right out of the gate, whether you do the feel, felt, found, or you do the time and money and the reframe. If someone says, it's a lot of money, that's the reason you should do it, which would be a reframe. You may do student examples of a father-son having a conversation about whether they should do it or not have it, which mimics a real conversation that people have in the open marketplace. Or you may do the spousal close where you talk about a spouse, one of them wanting to do it, one of them not wanting to do it. And I always say, well, if you really believe that you love your wife, your husband, you have to let them do it because it's good for them, right? Create social proof. This is that whole piece about, showing your students, showing your success stories, proximity of power, get the pictures. I know that's the case because you're here, right? And demonstration of power brings up, how can you demonstrate power, right? Well, a free event, an online event shows a demonstration of power. A simple product shows a demonstration of power. A lead generator shows a demonstration of power. A free consultation shows a demonstration of power. A free webinar shows a demonstration of power. YouTube videos show a demonstration of power. Case studies show a demonstration of power. A free mini course, and we chatted about that last week, right? Doing a challenge model, right? That is a free mini course because, 3 days, 5 days, you do 2 or 3 hours every day. I'll come back to that in just a minute. Low end product, demonstration of power. An audit, demonstration of power, right? Cheat sheets, how to get there fast and furious, demonstration of power. Secret information, demonstration of power. A quiz, right? Giving them a quiz where you show where their strengths are and where their weaknesses are or who they are, demonstration of power, right? I know the quiz one because I do it all the time. Personality styles, right? You want to frame the offer as the next step. So once you've introduced the journey early, when you go to the sales side of the fence, the next logical step is going to the 3-day workshop. The next logical step is going to Adam's house, whatever it might be, right? And it's just part of the sequence. Stack value, right? Stacking value is really about building value. It is important for you as you're doing the benefits to show the financial value as well as the emotional value for the 4 types of people. The spade wants a result in a very short period of time. That's usually money success. The club wants to be right. So you're showing them how your system is the right system and not the wrong system. That's building value. The heart wants to give back. The heart wants to look after their family. The heart wants to be social in nature. So how is your product, your service going to help them? And you've got to seed that, and this is the surface value versus the emotional value. Each benefit, just so you know, needs to have an emotional benefit, right? So when I'm doing a stack, and let's say there are 7 elements in the stack, and I have mentioned this before in previous training, if there's 7 elements that my product solves problems for, I take each of the elements and I target a social style, right? So if there's a system and a process or a guarantee, I target the club in my message emotionally. If I see, that they get a result in a very short period of time, right, by me doing the work for them, which could be an element of my product or service, I'm going to talk about the spade personality. If I see there's a community element, where they can participate with other individuals, I'm going to target the heart or the diamond because that's what they love and that's what they enjoy. So each benefit, right, you need to consider the social styles, right? And you need to create pain and gain for the social styles. By the way, each benefit can also be reinforced by doing quotes, right? Quotes actually will help people in terms of making decisions because it's not you telling them, it's someone else telling them. So a Tony Robbins quote, a Les Brown quote, a quote in general by Branson that delivers a message just reinforces your message. And I actually put those quotes on a slide deck before I start. And I mentioned this at the beginning. And I let it play for 20 minutes. Now, there are 7 big areas that you really want to deal with when you're building your presentation. The first is fear. Fear of failure, fear of the unknown, fear of loss. All right, those are big perceived fears. Pain of staying where they're at. And this is called the Scrooge close, or what Tony would call the Scrooge close. And that is you show them if they stay where they're at, what life will be like. If they make the shift, they change their destiny, and that's what will be a new future. So showing them 2 paths, one where they stay where they're at, and the financial cost, the social cost, the emotional cost, the family cost, the wealth cost of not doing anything, procrastination, right? That is the pain of them staying where they're at. And then the benefit, if they make the shift, make the change, right? And the gain that they're going to get. Third one, regret. Regret is a big motivator. A lot of people, especially if they're starting to get into their 45s and 50s, I realize that life is getting short. That's one of the reasons for doing the 80 boxes to show them that what they've been doing hasn't been working because they want more in life. They want to have a better income. They want to have a better life. They want to have a better lifestyle. They want to have 2 million pounds in retirement. And that is creating, geez, I don't want regret in my future. Another one that you should tap is reaching their full potential because everybody believes they have a greater gift in them than they have. And I believe that to be true, by the way. Everybody has a treasure within them, but you've got to bring that out for them, so that is a great way for them to reach their full potential. The power of other people's voices. This is an interesting one. You can use this positively or negatively. if you do not succeed, if you don't change your life and you continue and you get to age 65, what will your family say about you? What will other people say about you? And for some people, other people's opinions are much more important than their own, right? The same is true on the positive side. If you're successful, what will other people say about you? And people will talk highly of you, and some people value that because they believe that other people's opinions are the most important opinions. I don't. I think my opinion about myself is the most important, right? Money, perceived or real. Perceived in terms of what you could lose or will lose if you don't take action, or if you do make action, what you could do in terms of gain, right? And you got to challenge, one of the things is procrastination and staying in their comfort zone because they do not want to move. So you've got to challenge that perspective. You got to interrupt that pattern. You got to create pain for that pattern, right? And that might be as simple as doing a few exercises, right? You want to provide a bonus for taking action, right? We always want to have bonuses. So when we do our stack, here's the main product. We take each of the benefits, target a personality style, then we create a limited time or a limited quantity bonus, whether it's free consult or, PDFs or whatever it might be, right? So we want to create those bonuses. Create that sense of urgency by something. I usually try to do some sort of conditioning exercise early in my presentation. 20 pounds is the one I do normally, but I've used a book, I've used a USB for people to get an action, take it. So create that sense of urgency and reinforce it by doing some sort of conditioning exercise. Be clear on your call to action. What I mean by that is, if anything, you practice the close. When you get to the end, you want to be very deliberate. You want to slow down a little bit. You want to take your time. And most people rush the close. So this is where you want to slow down, give them very deliberate things that they must do. Now, if you have headliner, you should take a look at the headliner training and the application close. And there is actually a breakdown of the application close, but there is also Adam, doing an application close in Scotland. And if you watch that, you'll see not only the format, but you'll see how he did it, the words that he used. In fact, he used this to train Steve by doing the video over and over and over, practicing that one close. Reinforce confidence, address fears, show them that the system works. That's usually about direct and indirect testimonials, but we want to reinforce that. And comfort zone is the enemy of achievement. So one of the things I like to do is to get people to confront their comfort zone by doing exercises, right? So that might be an exercise like the 9-dot exercise. Now, this is an exercise that if you would like, I'm happy to send you the PowerPoint because it's only 2 slides, but literally it's to get people to start thinking outside the box a little bit, to not thinking the way that they are and thinking outside the box, right? Now, what I want you to do is draw on the piece of paper. I'm going to do this with you really quick. Draw on a piece of paper, 9 dots. You don't have to do this, just pay attention to me, right? And then I'm going to say, many people don't think outside the box. And thinking outside the box will actually make you successful. So what I want you to do is to start at one of the dots. It doesn't matter which of the dots you start with. Typically, it tends to be one of the outside dots, but it doesn't matter. Start at one of the dots and using 4 straight continuous lines, which means you can't take the pen off the paper. I want you to connect all of the dots. And most people will stay within the box. They'll try to connect the dots and they can't. There's no friggin' way you could connect the dots, right? And then what I'll say is, I'm going to reward somebody who did do it. Now, somebody in the class will have seen this exercise in the past. They will figure it out, and I will reward them, right? And then I'll say, look at somebody who has the answer already, and you're still trying to figure it out. Somebody has the answer already, and you're still trying to figure it out. I'll give the second person, that figures it out, right, a reward. And then it'll click for somebody. They'll go, oh my God, that person has the results. I need to go over there, get the results, show Jim it, and I'll get a prize. Right. And literally I'll reward that person as well. And then I'll say the message was in the delivery. You got to think outside the box, right? So there's line 1, there's line 2, there's line 3, there's line 4. And what that does is to get people to start to realize they're conditioned to look at things a different way. And there are all kinds of breaking outside the box exercises that can get people to open up, to be applicable to new ideas, right? To consider new ideas. By the way, if you happen to want this kind of piece, I'm happy to send it to you. Get them to consider movement, get them to consider change, get them to consider other ideas, get them to think about other things besides themselves. There's also some great stuff about group dynamics online. If you go to YouTube and you do group dynamics, you'll find this video, which is a group dynamic video about if there's a group of 100 people and one person starts doing something different, like dancing, right? The other 99, as a group, go, that guy's crazy. They go, there must be something wrong with him. But when a second person and a third person meet them, and it is the second and the third person within a group, it becomes a group dynamic and more people will want to do it, right? And this is a tested group dynamic piece, right? And what it means for a seminar business is I need to get the first two or three people moving to the back, right? Certainly if we were doing a stand up and go to the back close, because if I don't get that first person, that second person, and third person, I won't get 7, 8, 9, and 10, right? So you might want to take a look at group dynamics. Of course, you got to finish with a vision. The vision might be for your company. The vision might be for you. One of my visions was to touch the lives of 1 million people financially.